All right, now we're going into our fireside chat with Cody from Barracuda and Sam from Flexera, and they are going to introduce themselves and take it away. Thank you all for coming.
Wonderful. Thank you all for choosing this session to join this morning. We've got a lot of options, and so we appreciate that. I hope everyone enjoyed the keynote that ended a little while ago. As Nancy mentioned, my name is Sam Barbeau. I'm part of our FinOps advisory group within Flexera, and I've had the pleasure of working with Cody and the team at Barracuda over the past almost year and a half now on the FinOps journey that they've gone through. So today we're going to go through kind of a Q&A, a fireside chat, as the slide suggests, not sponsored by Solo Stove, unfortunately. And we will kind of go through their journey of adopting FinOps and maturing their program, some lessons learned along the way. And we thought it'd be clever to kind of use an ocean theme to this, and so we're going to dive into the Barracuda's FinOps journey. I had a bit where I was going to start like Zach Galifianakis on the Between Two Ferns, but these aren't ferns, so that wouldn't have landed.
Just give you a deadpan look.
Yes. Yes. Thank you. So let's just kick it off, right? So tell us a little bit, Cody, how you specifically got into FinOps inside of Barracuda.
Yeah, so first off, Cody McDaniels, I run our cloud operations team at Barracuda Networks. Our cloud operations team brings together a lot of areas for our product engineering, site reliability engineering, internal services, some frontline kind of what would be more traditional NOC type of teams. But then also part of that is a cloud center of excellence, which manages cloud governance for us. And part of that cloud governance responsibility is the FinOps piece. And so for me personally, I got involved in FinOps probably around about 2020, about 5 years ago, kind of evolving into my role at Barracuda. I've been there about 8 years. And when Barracuda itself got into FinOps, it was probably around 2018, 2019. We had an acquisition, and part of that acquisition was a cloud native team. And the first FinOps champion came as part of that role. And so from there, we built out additional capabilities, additional support. And as my role evolved over time, and our original kind of champion, his role in the organization evolved over time, slowly those responsibilities started to shift closer and closer towards my team until about the last year and a half or so, as I've been working with Sam and the Flexera team, we fully took on that responsibility. And so personally, it's been a bit of a slow trickle. At first being on the fringes, kind of working with my technical teams, working with our FinOps champion as well, and then slowly getting more ingrained, slowly getting more comfortable with what the FinOps role looks like, the decisions that happen on a day-to-day basis, and really what we need to be looking at in order to maintain our costs. That familiarity just kind of bred more and more responsibility.
Yeah. And so clearly FinOps is static and never changes and it never grows.
Sure.
Always evolving.
That is a very true statement if your time horizon is about 12 hours.
Yes. So given that it's changed, over the time since, 18, 19, kind of formalizing that within Barracuda, what are some of the initial maybe obstacles or challenges that you've faced or that the team's faced kind of going from there to now?
Well, I'm going to pick on you for a second because you just said 18, 19. So between then, cloud wasn't around originally.
Sure.
But some of the challenges that we face have really been our internal organizational structure was such that ownership around our budgets and our cloud was very dispersed. And the expectations across our different engineering teams were all over the map. Some teams did a very good job, even back in 2019, of managing their own costs and being able to drive efficiency. Other teams were completely blind. They didn't really do anything as far as managing their costs. They just kind of assumed somebody else did it, and it just kind of fell through the gaps, and costs kind of went a bit uncontained. So the biggest challenge for us has been to bring together that expectation around whose responsibility it ultimately is for maintaining your budgets, maintaining your forecasts, and then understanding when we make changes in our engineering, in our product architecture, what are the financial ramifications of those? And so, I mean, quite honestly, it was one of the early challenges. It is still a challenge, right? Everything's a journey. That's the map and the nautical journey theme here. And we've identified teams that we've continued to work with. And when they make product decisions, when they make engineering decisions, how do we get involved in their decision-making process so that when they want to make these tweaks, we understand, and everybody understands ultimately, what that means at a very technical level, whether you're changing instance types, whether you're changing from one database engine to another database engine, what are the costs that we're expecting that to look like? If we have commitments, what are the commitments that we're abandoning? And that's okay. That's one of the things I've worked with our teams to understand, saying it's okay if we're going to abandon it, but let's be very intentional. Then we also want to know, like, hey, we made a choice 6 months ago to abandon this reservation, so when it comes up for renewal, we don't just blindly say, all right, let's renew it. Like, there was a very intentional decision that we are going to accept that, we're going to let expire, and then here's the follow-on actions that we all agreed on 6 months ago to take in order to be as efficient as we possibly can. So those were some of the earliest challenges. It is still some of our bigger challenges. We've made a lot of headway. I think if I look back at 2019, we probably have 12 to 15 distinct engineering teams. It was probably 1 or 2 that we had a good relationship with. We're up now towards like 10 or 12 that we are actively working in and day out to understand what their decisions are and what the cost ramifications of those are going to be. So we still have a ways to go. We're not at full coverage yet, but that's the path.
Well, FinOps is never complete, right? There's always a longer tail to that and always evolving, right? So from the first kind of 2 or 3 teams that were highly engaged to the now 10 plus that are engaged today, was that a kind of them coming to you with the successes that they were having along the way and kind of how you would then relate that back to the business, or how did that kind of engagement with those various groups occur?
That's a good question. So a couple of ways. And honestly, the answer there is that it's mixed, right? So we identified a couple of teams that had areas of opportunity that we went out and proactively engaged and said, hey, I think we can help you out. Here's where you're at. I mean, it's a business, right? Everybody's got their profitability targets, their profitability margins that they're trying to hit. And so we have the visibility with our engineering leadership to understand who's doing well and who's doing not. So then having the insight and having the experience working with other teams, we could identify and say, hey, you've got some areas of opportunity here. We've got some expertise in-house in our department, and just put them together. And so there was a couple. I think of one in particular was one of our older engineering teams. They were kind of set in their ways. They didn't like people from the outside coming in and
Sure.
telling them what to do. And the first couple times we tried to engage them, they were very resistant. Like, no, we've got it all under control. And I'm like, look, you don't, because you're spending X amount of dollars per month in extended service, for example, because you guys don't want to update your database. Like, let us go in. And so we just kind of continued to be persistent with them and say, let us take a look here and let us take a look there. And it probably was about 1.5 years or so. I'm thinking specifically about our database engineers, to get involved with them and give them very hands-off, just, hey, here's some strategies you guys could use, and just kind of pepper them with information. And then actually over time, really over the last 9 to 10 months, they've started to embrace that team, and they're like, hey, we got to make this change. Can you help us? Can you help us not only put together that path, but also help us hands-on keyboard to make those adjustments? And then from the FinOps perspective, we're on the backside tracking what those changes are going to be, being able to provide forecasts of when the costs are going to change, when they're going to come down, when they're going to transition from one to the other, being able to give visibility into our engineering leadership to say, hey, our costs have accelerated now over the last couple of days, the last couple of weeks, but here's why. We're in the transition phase of where we're spinning things up and we're spinning other things down. It's going to go up. It's going to go up for 1.5 weeks, and then here's going to be that run rate, and then be able to provide the feedback as we go to say, yep, we're hitting plan, and that's where we go. And so that was always, to me, internally the organization, I use that example. I use that kind of as a guiding star, right? A point of other conversation with other teams to say like, look, we were able to work with this team who is notorious in the organization for being very insular. We were able to work with them to be able to get value to them, to be able to help them deliver change to their infrastructure and also lower their costs and be able to hit their profitability targets. And so that's helped then in turn bring other teams kind of reaching out to us to say, hey, I know you worked with them on this piece. Can you help us on this other piece over here? It's not the same, it's a different technology stack, but hey, yeah, we have some expertise, some subject matter experts that can work with you to do those things. And so it's been that kind of mix over time on how we've expanded our scope across the org.
And so it sounds like it wasn't a snowball initially, but more so like a casual kind of gradual growth of that trust from those teams, driving different use cases for the savings or actualizing, different cost reduction efforts. And obviously leadership in the business is going to appreciate wherever we can lower costs, where we're still getting value out of the cloud, right? So was that something that, from the engineering teams to leadership, there was I would say like a feedback loop, or there was a kind of cyclical approach of, this is how leadership appreciates, or this is how the business kind of sees the results that you've done, and did that help the growth?
Yeah, it did. So in that particular example, referencing our database engineers,
Right.
I had originally brought in, so our products, they all run databases, right? And so this would have been back in 2018, 2019. Identified to our leadership team, like we need some subject matter. Everybody here can, a developer can spin up a database and run it, but how performant are we on it? How efficient are we? And not necessarily from a cost standpoint directly, but from a performance standpoint. And so we made that commitment that said, hey, we're going to bring in these subject matter experts, kind of, by trade, experts in this area, and then start to kind of reach out to the organization. So the first step to me that was critical was trust from our leadership team that, yes, I agree, we do need this, and we're going to onboard it. But because of Barracuda, we're very decentralized in our engineering, or at least historically we had been. And so progress was very slow until we started to get some key wins to say, one of the early ones with a different team, again, same database engineers, but a different team, that said, hey, look, you guys are having product performance issues because your queries are not run very well. And so it was a performance tuning problem. But what that did is it actually improved our customer experience, it improved the efficiency of our product, but it also helped us improve our costs. So while yes, our leadership team is like, great, our customers have a better experience, what's also better about that is, hey, we're hitting more closer to our profitability targets now. And so that started to snowball out to say, what other teams can we reach out to? What other areas are we potentially not as efficient in our performance? That would, if we improve that, would improve our costs. And then from there, it bled out to other technologies, other than just databases. We started looking at Elastic or OpenSearch data, right? And started understanding where efficiencies we can get there. And some of the pieces that we're looking at now are around like Databricks, for example, is the next step focus area for us. And so that has started to balloon out, but it started with the trust to be able to say, yes, we know that we need to invest here and we will get gains on the backside of that. We got trust from our engineering teams because we improved their performance. And then following full circle, we reinforced the trust with our leadership team because we saw the financial gains out of it. And we were able, quite frankly, we were able to report on it, right? And be able to say very tangibly and visibly, here is the cost benefit that we're seeing.
Yeah, keeping score of the successes, right, and tracking not just the areas of opportunity, but the things that you have actioned on, I think are critical as part of that. So you've talked about kind of the multiple teams that you've kind of pulled into. Maybe initially there's a few slower adopters, but seem to have gained some ground for this whole FinOps culture and methodology, that feedback loop between the engineering and the leadership. How do you manage that, on a day-to-day basis, right? I know you're not very busy at all. You do have very little team meetings throughout the day and have oodles of time. So how do you manage the tactical, kind of collaboration with them with the strategic alignment of, say, where Barracuda is going in the market?
Yeah, In a couple of different ways. Because of the breadth of our product portfolio, we have to be, and quite frankly, our internal resourcing, we have to be very intentional about where we're spending our time. And so right now it's more about picking and choosing the areas that have the most opportunity or the teams that have the most challenges. There is one specifically right now that eats up all of our time. I was just telling you walking over here that I just got an email this morning and said, hey, when you get back, I need you to go find this and I need an answer by Tuesday. I'm like, oh, great.
Yeah. No pressure.
Right. But then also what it's done, and again, going back to that trusted leadership. So starting in 2 weeks now, actually, we have our first FinOps actual dedicated manager starting, which I'm very excited about, because what it has been in the past for us is it's kind of been this shared kind of parts of people's jobs. So I've got, myself, I've got my, who's now our director of our Cloud Center of Excellence. In the past, there was a couple of others who are no longer at Barracuda either, that we've all kind of had it as a part of our job, but it's never been our sole responsibility to focus in and day out. And what I'm noticing with my direct boss, and we've had these conversations over the last 9 months, is there's so much opportunity, but it takes time and investment in order to be able to identify them and realize them. And so that's been a gap. It's been a gap for us, and we've been trying to figure out how to fill this role and how to budget for this role for the better part of the past year now. So I'm very excited here in about 2 weeks that we're actually going to have somebody dedicated day in and day out to work with our engineering teams to be able to provide better forecasting. Sitting at the keynote, listening to one of the sessions this morning, he's like, yeah, we had one line item, right, for our organizational budget. I'm like, oh man, I have that, right? I don't have one line item, but I've got a team that is a very significant portion of our business, and their budget, like for AWS, is a single line item. And I'm like, guys, what is it by region? We need to get down to the SKU level, like the part number, like what are the independent cost drivers? But it takes time, and we don't have right now the resourcing to be able to do what we recognize we need to do. And so this is that first step, which I'm very excited about, because they will then, in theory, have the time to be able to dig into those. Again, going back to our prioritization, like where are the biggest opportunities, where are the biggest challenges, and that's where we start.
And it sounds like that individual won't be starting from scratch either, right? They'll be able to kind of come into a FinOps ecosystem, right, where you've already got some initial collaboration, you've already got some kind of forward progression, you've already got a great support team, that we work with on a weekly basis to kind of help guide them in that. So I know I'm kind of deviating from our agenda, but it sounds like that individual will be able to kind of hit the ground running, so to speak.
Yeah. So we have been putting in since the FinOps responsibility, fully came within my department in the last year and a half. We put together kind of a roadmap. And the first step on the roadmap was figuring out what's the right tooling that we need to have to be able to support what we want to do. And to enter Flexera, right? But from there, it's, okay, now that we have the tooling, what do we need to provide to our teams, and how do we provide it to them? So whether that's the proper chargeback and showback, staying with the theme from the keynote this morning, not just in our cloud spend, but across our SaaS, like from a product standpoint, there are multiple tools and services that you use to deliver that.
Yeah.
AWS and Azure, where we operate, is a big part of it, but it's not the only part of it. And so if we don't bring those in, we don't have a proper full view of what it takes to run our product and bring it up to market, bring it to our customers. And so we've been charting that path, and now we have like a fully baked out roadmap of what I want to get out of our FinOps program. And so there's a lot of that foundation laid for this person that, from what I'm looking at it as, okay, here's what you need to execute on. It's not coming in from scratch and saying somebody like, all right, tell us what to do, because we need to learn and figure out what's the best way to go. It's more about executing what we know we want to achieve.
Yeah. And so when they're coming in, right, looking at kind of the what their initial roadmap is going to be, clearly you've successfully made the case to the business to say, hey, we need a dedicated FinOps kind of manager, right, to drive our next iterations forward. What type of positive impact, or potentially negative impact, what impact period has FinOps driven for Barracuda from a business perspective to where they were saying, hey, we actually do need to maybe lean in on this, have more kind of a dedicated presence, take this on full time? I mean, clearly that didn't just get approved, off of a random request, right? There was some precedence, there was some referenceable kind of artifacts of success. And so what are some of those things that kind of drove impact for the business?
Yeah, spiraling budgets.
Yeah.
I mean, when you really boil it down, that's what it comes down to. A
Yeah.
lack of awareness when changes are made and what the financial impact of those are. I think from my leadership team standpoint, I know one of the things that he gets frustrated about, and if he's watching this, I apologize for putting words in your mouth potentially, but when he sees changes to costs and he goes and asks questions and the answer is, I don't know. That fundamentally is the problem that we want to try to address, right? So when we make changes, there was one that showed up, one of the teams started using Amazon Kinesis. This was back at the beginning of the year. And we got a flag on it and said, hey, this team has started to use this service and it's now spending about $6,000, $7,000 a month, which isn't that big a deal, but it was new and nobody knew about it. And so I went and asked, and the answer that we got was, well, we had to make some changes to our ingestion architecture to make it more efficient. I'm like, okay, makes sense. What do you expect this run rate to look like? And if you're making a change to add something new, what are you not doing instead? And we didn't really have great answers to it. Fast forward from beginning of February now until like April, and that cost is like $150,000 a month, and we still don't have great answers. And it's like, whoa, we got to put a pause on this to figure out really what's the end game here. Like, is this our expected run rate? Are we hitting a high water mark? Where are we going to get down to? Like, we need to understand what's tenable and what's not.
If it's providing a lot of value, that increased cost, may not be a bad thing, right?
Sure.
If it's driving X amount above, what you would expect, but correct. If you're not able to kind of see why and the how, then that could be challenging.
Yeah, and so back to, from my boss's perspective, like, what are we delivering and why did this change? And the answer is, I'm not really sure, I don't know. That's problematic. That's an area, quite frankly, I look at it's an area of opportunity for the FinOps program to say, like, we can help bring answers to these, right? And we can help drive the decision-making before the fact, but we need to have the resources to be able to do it. We need to have the engagement with the teams. And so what he wants to understand, and one of the processes that we've since started to put into place is, okay, we need to look at these every other week. And now we had a process where we had a weekly reporting, and that was before we'd switched over to Flexera, and we're trying to get back to it, part of our resourcing. But to sit down with the teams on an every other week basis so that way we can catch these things. And most of the time it should be a thumbs up, everything's looking good, or hey, this has started to kind of reach our upper bound, maybe we should kind of look at what's going on there. But we can catch them within weeks, as opposed to that problem, it was caught months after the fact. And I think that's that time frame, that's the gap we're trying to fill. That's the opportunity, again, I look at it from our team standpoint, that's the opportunity that we can provide value to the organization.
Sure. So from an optimization or from an opportunity perspective, I think there's a lot of emphasis around cost cutting, especially in this day and age, right? Driving the budget down, or what's consuming the budget down. And kind of going back, something sticking with me from what you mentioned earlier around the engineer teams, right? The first 2 or 3 that you started working with, maybe we're being asked, hey, how's your current utilization? Tell us about, the why behind the spend, increasing in certain areas. And I'm sure they were going, through a lot of requests of reduce costs. And I think there's a lot of kind of weight and pressure on engineers to be the end-all be-all solution to FinOps within an organization and to save money, and that's the goal, right? But as we know, it's not just about cutting cost and reducing spend, it's identifying the value of cloud. And so how did you, kind of coming full circle here, how did you start kind of shifting the narrative with engineering to say it's not just cutting costs, right? But there's other FinOps related elements, to your collaboration, and this is why, focusing on these things matter?
Yeah, so I think there's a couple of pieces there, because it's not just, there's things that we did from a FinOps perspective, there's things that we've done from a more of a global engineering perspective, and quite frankly, there's things that we did from not just in engineering, but all of holistically across Barracuda, right, as far as visibility. And so helping teams to understand, and this is not from us, this is really from our executive team, but helping down to the individual contributor level to understand our financial targets as an organization and how their product performance and product efficiency attributes to those, which then kind of can turn back to, we're a company that has, everybody in the company has equity in the company. And so understanding how those changes in efficiency in our financial metrics as an organization reflect back on your ability to capitalize on the equity.
Yeah, I wasn't aware of that.
Right, that's a big one for our organization, and we started to in the last couple of years from our executive team having like ownership meetings with everybody in the company and really kind of getting into the specifics of how if you're spending a whole bunch of money that you shouldn't be because you're not really thinking about how effective you're being with your financials, that affects your ability to capitalize on that equity. So that was one piece there. I think from our standpoint, from the FinOps side, it's been about really helping them to understand if we can make better efficiency decisions with our financials. It really in turns comes back to better engineered products, which is less noise, less toil, less alerting, less KTLO that you got to work on, right? And so that's really affected kind of their day-to-day to say, hey, if we make these decisions up front appropriately, then you will benefit in doing the real work that you really want to do, right? Engineers want to be writing new code. They want to be writing features and functionality. They don't want to be debugging, or they don't want to be refactoring to be more efficient. So it's trying to reinforce bringing that decision-making process to include the FinOps piece. And then lastly, one of the things that we do as an organization is that we strive to every quarter have hackathons. And so we have started to identify one or two a year where we put themes on them. And so one of the ones that we did back in the Q4 of last year was to say, all right, let's put it on cost effectiveness, right? Let's make that our theme and see what we came out of it. And there was a lot of good that came out of it. There were some teams that came out and said, look, we can make these really simple changes and it has a very significant financial impact, but it takes some engineering. It's going to take 6 months. We're going to elevate our costs for 6 months, but when we get out of it, here's the, I don't want to give a specific number, but here's the significant reduction that we're going to see out of it. And yeah, it makes sense. Like, okay, we're going to spend 6 months of this and we're going to get ROI in 5.
Quite literally money back in their pockets being,
Exactly. And then there were some other pieces that came out of that said, this is actually really interesting. We can't do it necessarily today because we're already committed and it's a little bit more of a significant engineering. But then that feeds back into our backlog and we can put it in our back pocket and say for our next fiscal year, let's pull this thing back out and look at it and say, hey, here's something where we can invest engineering time to reduce our run rate by X amount. And we have a backlog of those. And so when we really need to go, when I get an email call and says, hey, where can we find X amount of dollars? We can just go to this backlog with the output of the hackathon and say, we could do this, we could do that, we could do this, and we'll hit it.
Yeah.
We don't have to go do the brainstorming, the investigation. We have it ready at hand. It's just about executing and committing engineering time.
So it seems like things are going really well, right? There's obviously a lot of opportunity to continue to advance the FinOps program. If you were forced to do a hard reset, right? Take out the cartridge, blow on it, put it back in the Nintendo 64, and unplug it and plug it back in, right? If you had to restart, would you do anything differently? Would you have changed, a process, pulling in a new team member, engaging a different part of the ecosystem?
I think the piece that we would do differently is understanding our allocation rules. So again, FinOps grew very organically within Barracuda. It came from, like I said earlier, a champion from an acquisition. A lot of our products were still running in data centers. They were hardware-based or appliance-based. They hadn't done and started their cloud migration. So while there's a lot of things I could probably look at and be like, I wish we could have done this, in reality, given the decentralized and spread out nature and the various infrastructures of our products, it never would have worked if I would have said I would go back and change this. But the one thing that we have learned, particularly over the last year, that I think would have been very important and much more helpful to know up front is to understand our allocation rules and understand how to build those out in a I don't want to say scalable. It's more about an adaptive way.
A dynamic,
yes.
Yeah, more responsive to the changes within maybe the organization or the way that you allocate.
Right.
Yeah.
So when we had made our transition into Flexera, one of the pieces that we had learned was a lot of the allocation rules were very manual. They were very statically aligned, and they didn't fit. Like it wasn't scalable the way those rules were. Like you remember going through
There
that
was
process.
an initial, MVP. You kind of had a match, but then there was a change that started to occur.
So we had to go back and figure out how to make those a little bit more scalable and to be able to handle new workloads. The other piece that affected us that we're still kind of working through today is that we're built on tagging.
Mm-hmm.
Tagging is a very static data point on your resource. And so when you are going through organizational change, you have to go back and update all those tags. And it's very resource intensive to do. And so like for us, for example, we had this whole tagging structure and it was great, it was fine. But now we've gone through organizational change. We've gone through, I mentioned earlier, decentralized kind of engineering and products. We've been on a journey internally at the organization for more unification. And all of a sudden now the business units that we had aligned it to, the product names that we had aligned it to, product life cycle goes up and down. Products get consolidated and it's no longer two distinct, it's one with a brand new name. So now we got to have all these allocation rules to bring those all in. We identified that we need to find a way to do our tagging strategy that it can be more dynamic, that's less of a lift. And so I think spending time on that and understanding it, and quite frankly, I wish I would have had some people that I could have talked to and said, how have you done this in the past, knowing I don't know what I don't know when it comes to this. How do we adapt to future changes? I think that would have made a lot of things easier. Mm-hmm. At least it would have made it so that we didn't spend so much time on doing the same thing over and over again every couple of years.
Potentially a hackathon theme.
So right now, we're actively in the process of reworking what that tagging structure looks like and putting in some more programmatic elements to it so that when we do have these changes going forward, we can make the change to change all the allocations. Yeah. I don't have to go back to the engineering team and say, I need you guys to update all your tags again. Because they're all out of date, they're all stale, we changed this, we changed that. You guys can leave them how they want. We can make some programmatic changes on our side that will give you the allocation that you need and give it to you in the business unit structure, the product structure, however we want to look at it, with minimal effort from the engineering team, and quickly get to providing the proper level of visibility to our executive team.
So assuming that goes really well, I'm sure it will. What's next?
What's next? So there's a lot. There's a lot for us as far as, like I mentioned earlier, that roadmap of where we want to get to. Mm-hmm. There's maturity. If you look at the crawl, walk, run, there's pieces where we're running before we're ready. There's pieces where we're running and it's going well. There's pieces where we're still crawling. It's a mess. I want to bring more consistency to it across the board. And then the big one, which I'm personally curious about sitting on some sessions today and tomorrow, is around the whole AI piece, right? And so understanding FinOps for AI, what does that really mean for us? How do we identify efficiency? How do we identify ROI? For us, the whole AI piece, particularly Gen AI, is still very heavy in our R&D, and so there isn't a lot of financial checks on it quite yet, but I know within the next 12 months I'm going to get an email. In 6 months I'm going to get an email from
next
executive.
Tuesday, you're going to have X, Y, and Z.
Right. how efficient are we? Where are the areas for opportunity around our AI workloads? And so I know it's coming, and I want to be able to have our team prepared to be able to answer those questions when they come.
Right. So a FinOps for AI kind of approach to bringing that in just like you're doing for public cloud spend, for the SaaS spend. And I know that's another kind of foray into the future as well, getting better grasps around that.
Yep.
So that's extremely interesting, and I appreciate you taking the time to be up here and chat about your experience and your journey so far. It's never over.
Oh, yeah.
And we're going to be, at some point, FinOps is going to, I think, expand to include, I don't know, maybe gardening tools at some point. But,
If that's what you're building.
Hey, go for it. So I think we're at the time now where we'll take questions from the group. Any final thoughts before we kind of go into Q&A?
No, I appreciate it, and I really, I could talk probably for days because it's interesting.
Yeah.
I just like talking about interesting topics and like where we're going to go and what we're going to do. So, I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah.
It's good stuff.
Love it. Okay.
All right, we'll open up. I saw somebody, question back over here.
Pretty loud, it told me to go.
Well, here, I'll give you the mic just in case we're recording and they can, there you go.
You started talking to this, so I want to double tap into it. But from a FinOps perspective, right, we know that historically finance and procurement get along with engineering really well. But what would you want those teams to know more about from the engineering perspective of FinOps?
Yeah, so I meet with our finance, our FP&A representative once a week, and he's been really good to kind of learn our responsibility in our day in. I think the biggest pieces to me are to understand that it really is a day in and day out practice, to understand and be able to identify and respond to changes from our product infrastructure, to be able to understand when teams all of a sudden buy commitments and then abandon them, like how do we respond to that? How do we react to that? It's not so much hey, once a quarter or even once a month, go back and look at what our costs were this past month. It's more about trying to get as granular and as near time as you can. So day in and day out, what happened yesterday? Does it match what we did, what we planned to do? How do we respond? How do we field requests from our engineering teams that say, hey, we want to look at doing this. What happens? Or I want to change instance types. Like, do we have commitments that I have to account for? And so being able to respond to those, it's not a once a month kind of look back. It is a day-to-day exercise. And that's, again, why I'm excited about having somebody full-time, because that's the opportunity we have.
I was thinking, I don't know, one more question before we jump to an audience question, if that's okay. So I remember kind of in preparation for this, we were talking about the hackathons and then some of the other things, talking to just like the day-to-day experience. And you go through, and your team goes through feedback loops, right? So you kind of poll your consumers and saying, what do you need? How are you doing? And not just us as a vendor, right? But in general, right, from a FinOps kind of methodology perspective, is there any nuggets out of there that you think would be, helpful or relatable to the group here?
I do. So what you're talking about, one of the things I've said with my teams is I want us to interact with our engineering counterparts as though we're an outside vendor. Like, we need to deliver that level of maturity in our solutions, in our services, and we also need to be able to take feedback on how we need to improve. And so to that end, my director of Cloud Center of Excellence started to hold user sessions around FinOps. And I think there's some pieces that we knew that we need to get some allocations into the system. We need to get some chargebacks that are not there into the system yet. There also raised an awareness for us that we probably need to do a better job, and I won't even say probably, we need to do a better job of education and enablement for our teams. There's a level of, I think, maturity and experience that we kind of anticipated, that I think we overestimated. And so we got to go back and look and say, okay, how do we get the level of comfortability with our engineering leaders so that way they can go into the tool, they can understand and be able to self-service their own pieces. And I think that was one of the biggest ones. I think there's more of a gap there than we had realized.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, I think we have time for one more. I'm going to let this gentleman ask.
Hi, Cody. Hi, Sam. Cody, this is regards to the multi-cloud environment. I'm sure you have a cloud environment at scale, and if you want to define the unit economics, and where your business units are spread across all the clouds? And what are the challenges you have faced?
Yeah, so getting all of our pieces in one place is the first challenge. Because like I said earlier, while the public clouds, the CSPs, they're the biggest chunk, they're not everything. And we have to especially understand when some of those independent pieces kind of start to go out of control and we don't realize it, we got to bring that back in. And so it's getting all of our costs in one place. The other area where it's on our roadmap, but again, it's not the top priority because we got to get all of our costs. All of our costs in one place first. From there, it's understanding for each of our product teams like a usage data, a usage metric, so we can get to that unit level economics. Some teams have it. They just do it right now all in spreadsheets. Some teams have never had it at all. They don't even understand, and that's probably not fair, but they haven't documented exactly what their usage drivers are from their product standpoint. And so while unit economics is on my roadmap, I feel like I'm at a point where I've got about 7 or 8 different things I got to get to in order to be able to get there. And then from there, we got to actually start to bring in all that usage data. And the path that I see there is to be able to bring everything together, then to start to work with the individual teams to really get granular and understand what are your cost drivers, what is the usage metric within your product that really drives your cost, so that way we can pull those economics together. Some teams know it and some teams don't. And so I think that's the kind of the challenge out of us.
Sure.
Yeah, great question.
All right, I'm going to come in and interrupt and say we have to wrap up because we have another session coming in just a minute. And thank you all for coming. Cody, Sam, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.